Ambassador Zrixthal had seen many strange things in his 40 cycles of diplomatic service across the galaxy. He had witnessed the methane breathers of Titan perform their crystalline dances, observed the hive minds of Kepler 442b merge and separate like living oceans, and even survived a formal dinner with the notoriously toxic Sulfurians. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for humanity's latest diplomatic catastrophe. The incident occurred on the neutral station orbiting the binary stars of the Threshold system, where representatives from the Galactic Council had gathered to evaluate Earth's petition for full membership. The humans had been on probationary status for 3 standard years, ever since their faster-than-light vessels had burst into council space like excited children crashing a sophisticated garden party. Zrixthal's species, the Valkyrie, prided themselves on order, protocol, and above all respect for the natural hierarchies of the universe. When the Korathi delegation arrived with their ceremonial guardian beasts, it should have been a routine display of cultural exchange. The Korathi were apex predators from a death world classified as Category 9, only 3 levels below Earth's own alarmingly hostile classification. Their guardian beasts, the dreaded Scalryx, were 6-limbed killing machines that stood taller than most sentient species, with armored hides that could deflect plasma fire and jaws capable of crushing starship hull plating. The Korathi brought their youngest Scalryx as a gesture of peace, though youngest still meant a creature weighing 400 kilograms with teeth like daggers. The cub was barely 3 cycles old, still learning the sophisticated hunting techniques that made adult Scalryx the most feared creatures in 12 sectors. Zrixthal watched from the observation deck as the Korathi handlers guided the young beast through the station's central plaza, demonstrating its training to the assembled dignitaries. The cub moved with lethal grace despite its youth, and when it released a practice roar that shook the reinforced windows, several delegates instinctively activated their personal shield generators. That's when the humans showed up. Captain Sarah Chen wasn't supposed to be in that section of the station. According to the itinerary Zrixthal had personally approved, the human delegation should have been in Conference Hall 7, reviewing trade regulations. But humans, as the ambassador had learned, possessed a spectacular talent for being exactly where they weren't expected. Chen walked into the plaza carrying a beverage container and what appeared to be a data tablet, clearly lost in thought about something entirely unrelated to the diplomatic proceedings. She wore the casual uniform variant that humans favored, comfortable, practical, and completely inappropriate for a formal gathering of this magnitude. The Scalryx cub noticed her immediately, its 6 eyes locked onto the human with predatory focus, and its nostril slits flared as it processed this new creature's scent. The Korathi handlers tensed, ready to intervene if necessary, though their body language suggested they expected the human to flee or freeze in terror. The cub approached slowly, lowering its massive head to bring its eyes level with Chen. It inhaled deeply, analyzing, cataloging. Then it released another roar, softer than before but still impressive enough to ruffle Chen's hair and make her blink against the force of the expelled air. What happened next would be debated in xenobiological circles for decades. Captain Chen set down her beverage and tablet calmly. She squared her shoulders, took a deep breath that expanded her relatively small chest, and roared back. It wasn't a scream of fear or a shout of alarm. It was a roar, a deep, primal sound that erupted from somewhere in the human's core and filled the plaza with such unexpected ferocity that half the assembled delegates activated emergency evacuation protocols. The sound wasn't louder than the Scalryx's roar. Not exactly, but it carried something different in it, something that millions of years of evolution had encoded into the brainstem of every creature that had ever been prey or predator. The sound of something that refused to back down. The effect on the Scalryx cub was instantaneous and completely unprecedented. The massive predator's eyes widened in what could only be described as delighted surprise. Its armored tail began to move, not in aggression, but in a rapid back-and-forth motion that Zrixthal's translation software identified as extreme. Excitement, pleasure response, then the 400-kilogram apex predator from a Category 9 death world rolled onto its back, exposing its vulnerable belly, and made a sound that the Korathi handlers had never heard in 3 generations of breeding programs. It purred. Chen, displaying either remarkable courage or remarkable stupidity, the line remained unclear, knelt beside the creature and began scratching its armored belly plates. The cub's 6 limbs flailed in the air with pure joy, and the purring intensified until it created sympathetic vibrations in the station's structural supports. "Who's a good apex predator?" Chen cooed in that peculiar high-pitched voice humans used for creatures they found endearing. "Yes, you are. Yes, you are." Such a fierce little murder machine. The Korathi delegation stood frozen in shock. Their ceremonial guardian beast, bred for 1,000 generations to be the ultimate expression of predatory excellence, had been reduced to a playful pet by a human, using nothing but audacity and enthusiasm. Ambassador Vilkesh of the Korathi, a warrior who had personally defeated 3 challengers in ritual combat and commanded fleets in the border wars, approached slowly. His translator crackled to life. "Captain Chen, how did you know to respond that way?" The Scalrics are trained from birth to recognize only submission or challenge. "They do not." He gestured helplessly at his purring guardian beast. "Do this." Chen looked up, seeming genuinely confused by the question. "Oh well, he's basically a puppy, right? Young predator species usually engage in play behavior that mimics hunting. When he roared, he was inviting interaction, not issuing a serious threat. So I responded in kind to establish friendly intent." She paused, scratching behind what might have been the creature's ear analog. "Also, he reminds me of my dog back home. German Shepherd. Same energy." Zrixthal accessed his databanks frantically. Dog translated as a domesticated subspecies of a creature called wolf, which his files noted as a highly successful pack-hunting predator from Earth. Humans had apparently taken one of their planet's apex predators and turned them into companions through selective breeding. "You domesticated your predators?" Vilkesh asked, his voice hollow with disbelief. "Well, yeah," Chen said, as if this were the most natural thing in the universe. "Also our prey animals, and our scavengers, and several species that are actively poisonous to us. Oh, and cats. We're not entirely sure who domesticated whom there, but we coexist pretty well." The Scalrix cub, as if to punctuate this point, had somehow maneuvered its massive head into Chen's lap and was gazing up at her with 6 eyes full of adoration. In his 40 cycles of service, Zrixthal had learned one universal truth. Every species believed they understood the nature of predation, survival, and the hierarchies of the food chain. But humans who had climbed to the top of the ladder on one of the galaxy's most hostile worlds had apparently looked at those hierarchies and decided they were more like suggestions. The Galactic Council approved Earth's full membership 3 days later. The vote was unanimous, though Zrixthal noted that several delegates mentioned wanting to maintain close diplomatic ties with any species capable of befriending apex predators through sheer force of personality. Captain Chen was reprimanded for being off schedule and creating a diplomatic incident. She was also formally thanked by the Korathi delegation for revealing previously unknown behavioral patterns in their guardian beasts, opening entirely new avenues for interspecies cooperation. The Scalrix cub, for its part, had to be physically carried away from Chen when the diplomatic proceedings concluded. It actually whined, as it was led back to the Korathi ship, its 6 eyes fixed on the human who had somehow convinced a killing machine that belly rubs were better than hunting. As Zrixthal filed his final report, he included a note for future ambassadors dealing with humanity. They do not conquer their world's predators through strength or fear. They simply refuse to acknowledge that anything cannot be befriended, and somehow, impossibly, they are usually right. Approach all human interactions with this knowledge, and perhaps we too may learn to roar with such audacious confidence.